Hi Flosstube, this is Kim. I am back with Flosstube number 4. Today is February the 18th. It's President's Day here in the United States, and that means my kids and my husband don't have school or work, so they're home, which puts me back into the guest bedroom so that I can record without an interruption. First off, I'd like to thank everyone who has watched and subscribed and commented and liked. I really appreciate it. I think I'm currently up to 340 subscribers, and that just really makes me happy and encourages me to make more videos, so thank you. Also thanks to Ann P for giving me a shout out in her video. We're both admins to Full Coverage Fanatics, and this week we've been having a lot of fun brainstorming ideas for stitch-alongs and events in the group for next year, or maybe even some this year, just because Magical Stitches, the School of Magical Stitches and Literature group, has just been jump-starting our creative juices in our heads, and we're just coming up with all kinds of ideas. So, what did I work on this week? Well, last Monday I already showed you the beginnings of my homework on Friendship Compass for something that I modified as part of the Apologies Potion homework in Magical Stitches. Next, I worked on Trick or Treat by Randall Spangler. We only had to do 2 out of 3 tasks, but we got extra points if we did all 3. So, of course, me being Ravenclaw, I had to do all 3. I had to get all the extra points for our house. So the other 2 tasks were work on something with a cat and work on something with a ghost. No. Yes. Work on something with a cat and a ghost. And then one of the February extra credit tasks is also work on something with a scary animal. And Vicky and Kate had already said that a cat, especially a black cat, already counted as a scary animal. So I put in, because of my tent stitching, I had to double everything. So I put in 1,200 stitches on Trick or Treat by Randall Spangler. There's what it looks like. This is the one that I'm doing Extreme Cross Country, at least for the color black, which is the most used color. And I started at the bottom. So we're going to look over here in this corner where that black cat is. And there you go. You can tell there's a cat there in some of the dark areas of the grass. Now again, this page goes up to here. So I've got most of a black cat. This is 25 count easy count Lugana. Then I'm working 2/1 continental tent stitch and extreme cross country. So that's Trick or Treat. This is on my largest quantum scroll frame. I believe the fabric is 36 inches, so 3 feet wide. You want to keep that in mind for part of the video later on. So that was Trick or Treat. And then next, that finished last week's homework, so I decided to work on my last February extra credit task, which was work on a piece with words on it. So I pulled out Camelot Sampler, because as you can see, there are words on it. I've already done the words, but we didn't have to work on that particular part for this. So I decided to work on Guinevere's face, which is 1/1 on 28 count. Now, look at how pale her face is there. This is the case where the photograph of the model does not accurately depict how it will show up when you stitch it. So I put in 500 1/1 stitches. She is missing her eyes right now, but her entire face is done besides that. Now you can see there's some really dark colors in there. There's even some lavenders, like 3743 and 3042, to help with the shading, and some dark tans for the shadow of her neck. I did not do the eyes yet because 1, I hit my 500 mark that I needed, and 2, even on the 1/1 part of the chart, the symbols underneath the backstitch lines were really hard to read. So I'm going to have fresh eyes, you know, first thing in the morning kind of thing, not last night when I was working on it. So I can figure out what colors are supposed to be underneath those backstitch lines. So that's Camelot Sampler. And then last week we had a surprise basilisk attack in the School of Magical Stitches. We had to put in as many stitches as possible on a scary piece. And since most of my scary pieces, like Trick or Treat, are tent stitch, I would have to cut my stitches in half, and I didn't want to do that. So I pulled out a different piece that could be justified as scary, which is Haunted Mansion Stretched Portraits. This is an Etsy pattern by Good Morning Maui. And I started it earlier this year with this quicksand portrait. I had the frame, the quicksand, and this first bottom gentleman were all done. So that's where I picked it up this week for, it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, for the basilisk attack. And I did 2,089 stitches. So I finished up, I stitched the other two gentlemen, and then I stitched this entire frame, the ground, and the dirt from the grave. Some of the greenery is started, and the tombstone is started. So that was over 2,000 stitches in 3 days on Haunted Mansion Stretched Portraits. This is 28 count Monaco that I dyed with Rit. So, and then the only other piece I worked on this week was moon hair, of course, every day, at least a little bit. Artwork by Susan Geisman, charted by Hade. This is my 90-day challenge piece in Full Coverage Fanatics. I started working since last week. I finished that row up. So I started the last row and started on this page with the 3 flowers and the bunny rabbit's tail. I will admit that on the days of the basilisk attack, I only put in like 1 or 2 lengths of floss. But it counts. I worked on it. And since it was a new page, I was choosing the big clumps of color. So it looks like I did a lot, but I really didn't work on it that much. So there's the center of one flower, the yellow around it. There's another one. There's going to be a third one right up here. And then the yellow ground starts right there. So I gridded the entire bottom row since it all fits on the Q-snap. And there you can see I had to cover up some of them, but that's how much left I have to finish the piece. So that's moon hair. Again, 25 count Lugana. This just isn't the easy count. It's just regular Lugana. 2/1 10 stitch. So, the other things I did this week was to finish FFOing the pieces that I had started last week. The first one is Seasonal Celebrations Winter by Country Cottage Needleworks. This is a chart that Vana, the Twisted Stitcher, hosted a SAL with, I believe, 4 charts or 8 charts you could choose from that we started New Year's Eve day. And I finished it in January. I had this wooden sled that I had found in a thrift shop for $2 or $3. And I picked up specifically knowing I could put this piece on there, inspired by Priscilla and Chelsea. And I finished it. So, there it is. This is stitched on 32 count Mercedes, 32 count Lugana in Mercedes by Picture This Plus. This border, that's scrapbook paper. I tried to get fabric that matched, like a check that matched the colors, but it was just slightly off and it was detracting from it. So instead, I looked through my stash, and sure enough, I had some scrapbook paper that completely matched. So I mounted that on, wrapped that around some cardboard. These are glued together. It's permanently glued to this piece because I can't think of anything else I'll stitch that will fit. This sled, the center piece of wood did say welcome behind it, so I covered that up. And then it is impossible right now to find some winter greenery in the craft stores. I have a Joann's and a Hobby Lobby here in my little town, no Michael's. I looked and I looked and I couldn't find anything, and I wanted to finish this now instead of waiting until whenever Hobby Lobby, starts putting this Christmas stuff out in, July, August. So I looked at what I had, and I had an old tabletop wreath that was falling apart. It's like any artificial Christmas tree type stuff, so I used some wire cutters and I cut off some of that. And one of the decorations on the wreath was a grouping of 3 pine cones, so I put that in there. And as you saw right now, I just used the wire branches and attached it that way, so it's really easy to come off. I can switch it if I want to. Once the winter greenery is back in the stores, if there's something I like more, I can change it. So, and it's got a piece of twine to hang it from. And it's pretty heavy because this is a solid wood sled, but it's pretty cute. And the other thing I fully finished was Guardians of Notre Dame, which is a mystery sale from last year from Ingleside Imaginarium, or Brittany. I actually got to meet Brittany in person last July when she came to Julie's shop, Reflections Framing and Stitching. So, of course, I brought my whip and was able to show it to her. Before I put this together, I'm going to show you how I finished it. Because it is a round design, I cut out a piece of foam core and pinned it to that, which I just kind of held it up until all the sides were even, stuck a pin in the very center of the design, and then stretched it out and alternating, putting pins in the sides of the foam core. And then I covered up the edges with some ribbon that matched but didn't detract from the design, didn't pull your eye away from the design. And to secure the fabric on the back, this was my husband's suggestion to do these pleats using Aileen's tacky glue. I made those pleats, which is really easy because the tacky glue holds like within 15 seconds. You hold it down and then you move on to the next one until you go all the way around. And it's pretty flat. So, because I'm mounting this on a steel tray that's slightly concave, and this is slightly bigger than the flattest part of the tray, using magnets was actually the easiest way to mount it, even though I don't intend to change this out. Once this is in the piece, it's in the piece. So, and this tray I found at a thrift shop for $1. It says, it doesn't say where it was made, but it does say Monterey on the back. So I think it's pretty perfect for this piece. Simple frame with, a little bit of decoration, but doesn't take away from the design. And I'm going to put it on like a plate pedestal. So every 3 months or so, if I want to rotate it to look at a different part, I can. So that is Guardians of Notre Dame. Thank you, Brittany, for a wonderful design. She just released a new mystery stitch along that's called I didn't even write it down, but it's a play on, it's a war of claw and tooth and claw, a war of tooth and claw maybe. It's a play on Game of Thrones, but it's all animals, and there's this cool crown in the center of it that's all in metallics, the new metallics that came out. There's no borders, so that's less work for the stitchers, and I'm really excited. She gave a sneak peek of a stag on it. So I'm really excited to see more of that. And let's see. So those are my FFOs for the week. The other thing I worked on was it's a piece of motivation to finish up Moon Hair, because I have a supersized Haid that I want to start, but I won't let myself start it until Moon Hair is done. Now, pardon my reach while I get the cover sheet. So the one that I have is supersized museum shelf color expansion. However, you can see all my chicken scratch on there. I am not going to stitch the outer gold frame. This is the only bookshelf of M.A. Stewart's that has a frame on it. And I figured if I ever finish it and frame it, it's going to have a frame already. It doesn't need an interior frame. So I looked at the pattern, and this frame is not identical all the way around. So I figured out how many to cut out on each side. So my new size is going to be 947 by 672. That's really big. And on 25 count with a 3-inch border on the sides, that's 44 inches wide fabric. And I told you that the frame Trick or Treat is on only holds 36. I didn't want to really go buy another frame. So I was thinking and thought up a different way. And what I'm going to do is I had my husband make a PVC frame that the Q-snap clamps fit on. So the fabric's 44 inches wide. I don't want to stitch it sideways because that's just too much to wrap your brain around when you have to hold the tablet sideways and look at the symbols a different way. Mark off your squares a different way. So my frame is 48 inches wide, 4 feet wide, and 10 inches high. And the Q-snap clamps are on the way from 123 Stitch. So if I put this on a queen size bed, it almost covers the bed from side to side. This was $5 worth of PVC, including the 4 elbows. So $5 for that, and $10 for 6 Q-snap clamps. So I have 2 of the longer ones, the 17.5 inch, or 2 of those for each long side, and the 8.5 inch one, which goes on the 11 inch Q-snap. So that should cover just about the fabric on the long sides. And of course, I'm not going to clamp it on the short sides. It's just going to be like a scroll frame. And I already have the yard of 25 count Easy Grid. And that fabric, if you've ever seen it in person, it is stiffer than a regular Lugana. So I think with the Q-snap clamps on the top and the bottom, it'll be sufficient to stitch on it. And if I need more tension, I've got the side tensioner straps from Haid. So I can do that. But I can't start it until Moon Hair is done. So there's some motivation. I do have a Lowry frame. I have not checked to see if this will hold it. But sometimes when I'm stitching on Trick or Treat, I'll just, especially stitching on the far side, when I stitch, I sit on the side of the couch with the arm under my right arm because I'm left-handed, so my left hand goes underneath the fabric. My right arm just sits on the arm of the couch, and I can stitch that way. And with Trick or Treat, I just lay the frame on the arm of the couch, and there's enough weight that, especially when I'm working on the left side of the piece, where I can just work right here and not need a stand for it. So it's all going to depend on which part I'm working on. We'll see. Okay, plans for next week. They announced this week's homework, and the Chamber of Secrets is open. So there are 4 tasks and we don't have the stitch on the exact item, but there's the first one is skeleton, because of the quote that says her skeleton will lie in the chamber of secrets forever. So you have to work on a piece with the skeleton and explain it. Well, Trick or Treat doesn't have any skeletons in it. So I looked through all my magazines, especially this is Just Cross Stitch Halloween edition to 2012. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch one of these skull and crossbones as a Halloween small. I've got some 28 count Monaco that I dyed with Rit. I still have another Halloween small on there that I haven't cut out yet. So I'm just going to stitch it in black. That skull and crossbones in black underneath that one. And I'll have some Halloween smalls to put in a... I have a steel little shallow bowl that I'm going to use. So I will start that. You have to do 200 stitches for each task. And the second one is work on a piece that's related to the 4 things that keep you from dying and just petrify you in the book. So that's a camera, a ghost for Sir Nicholas, a puddle of water for Mrs. Norris, and a mirror that got Hermione. So a ghost, well, of course I'm going to work on Trick or Treat because this has ghosts on it. But again, this is tent stitching, so I'll have to put in 400 stitches. And I'll work above the cat because there's some fence posts that need to go in. So I might finish the cat's tail and put in the fence posts on that one. And then the third one is something that you've had to restart. I don't remember exactly what the task was. Oh, the phoenix comes because the phoenix is born from its ashes. So work on a piece that you had to restart. Well, last year I thought this piece was cursed. It was my New Year, New Start. This is a summer ball by Sandy Littlejohns and Deborah Lester. They're a mother-daughter team. It wasn't a cross-stitch collection over 3 magazine issues, or you can buy it from their Facebook page. This website, the website that's on this is no longer active. So you'd have to look for Cross Stitch Arts on Facebook or go to their Patreon page if you want this pattern. So this is my new start from last year when School of Magical Stitches was Jane Austen Reading and Stitch Along group where we read each book every 2 months. So I did page 1 last year and barely got a start on page 2. I did have to restart this like 3 times because I had fabric issues, I had gridding issues. I was originally going to try to stitch it sideways, and that just doesn't work. So I know stitching things sideways, especially full coverage, is not for me. So the successful restart is on 28 count, which makes it massive. And there's my starting point. There's page 1, and then you can see that green and gold. That's a little bit into page 2, where it's gridded. So I'll put in 200 more stitches to page 2. So that's a summer ball. And then the last part of the Chamber of Secrets is work on something that could be a weapon. Well, Harry defeated the basilisk with the Sword of Gryffindor. So I'm going to work on Excalibur on Camelot Sampler. Again, that's 1/1. And the 1/1 border on this and the letter was pretty easy. Guinevere's face was not easy. It was confetti. It was just like a face that was charted by Hade. So that wasn't easy. I'm sure this sword won't be as easy either, but that'll be 200 stitches into the sword. So those are my plans. Once I finish that, I'm not sure what I'm going to work on. Wednesday is Vicky's birthday, in the School of Magical Stitches, and she has invited some folks to, anyone who wants to join can join her in a new start. She's starting her unicorn pattern, which is a full coverage piece. And of course she wants me to start a full coverage piece. Not sure that I will. If I do, it'll be a story keep size, so a small one. Or I might start something else that I've got kitted and waiting to start. Let's see. The last thing that I have for you. Okay, so I told you last year the School of Magical Stitches was Jane Austen reading and Stitch Along. Pride and Prejudice has always been my favorite book of hers. I've listened to it, the audiobook, and I've also read it last year. I'm not much of a primitive stitcher, so as people were stitching all these Jane Austen designs, most of them are primitive, which really don't appeal to me. And, listening and reading to the book, it just stuck in my head how there's so many good quotes. And I didn't want to stitch a piece that just had one quote. Like, how can you pick one out of a whole book worth of good quotes? And so it was just mulling over in my brain last year what I could possibly do to possibly create a pattern that I liked, that wasn't primitive. And I'm quite the geek. I'm into, different fandoms, Harry Potter, Outlander, Star Wars, Disney, anything. It all appeals to me and my husband. And of course, when you get to those kind of fandoms, you come across all different kinds of patterns on Etsy. And then the light bulb went on over my head. If you are a fan of any of those, then you've seen the in this house type patterns where it says in this house, we know that the answer is always 42, or, all these Disney quotes, or you name it. There's mishmash sci-fi in this house patterns. There's ones that are specific to Harry Potter or Doctor Who or any of the Disney films. And I said, I'm going to write an in this house Pride and Prejudice pattern. So what I did is I went through the book and I searched on Goodreads and made sure all the quotes that you can find were actually from the book and not from the movie or the TV series. And knowing that I have 2 daughters, I worked parts of those book quotes into a paragraph that made sense for the fact that I'm raising 2 girls. And I made an in this house pattern, and it's pretty long, so it's all backstitched because you'll see it's really long. And after I wrote the paragraph, I sent it to my stitching friend Debbie, and also to Jessie Marie to have them read through it and double check me that it made sense. They both loved it, so I stitched it up, and here you go. I told you it was really long. And I'll read it to you. In this house, we acknowledge that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife. Our good opinion, once lost, is lost forever. Our character has ever been celebrated for its sincerity and frankness, and we must have our share of the conversation. We know that a person who can write a long letter with ease cannot write ill. We are not to be trifled with, for we are obstinate, headstrong girls. We know that being fond of dancing is a certain step towards falling in love. We think only of the past as its remembrance gives us pleasure. We never stir out of doors until we can prove that we have spent 10 minutes of every day in a rational manner. We will do anything rather than marry without affection, and we expect men to behave in a gentlemanlike manner. We know there is no enjoyment like reading, because in this house we do Pride and Prejudice. So I came up with this completely on my own. Found some alphabets that I could use that I liked, and I used PC Stitch, a CD-ROM that I had that Debbie gave me because she bought a Macintosh computer and couldn't use it anymore. So I used PC Stitch, and the hardest part was doing the math to know how long each line was and then centering it. sometimes it'd be off, especially due to punctuation marks or apostrophes, and I'd have to redo the entire thing to center it. So that is my first pattern, and that's why last year I changed my Instagram name to Spartan Stitcher. It used to be MSU_Rider, and I opened up an Etsy shop to put that in there. So I will link the Etsy shop in the description if you're interested. I do have 2 other patterns in that shop, but they are not completely my own creation. Because if you guys are on Facebook, you know that the Facebook algorithms learn what you're a fan of, and then they come up with these advertisements for things printed on t-shirts or coffee mugs in whatever you're interested in, be it Star Wars, Outlander, anything that you've been Googling, all of a sudden comes up on Facebook as an advertisement. So there's one that's a mashup of Star Wars and Game of Thrones. It's called House Solo. And so it's like a sigil from Game of Thrones. It says House Solo, never tell us the odds, and it's got the Millennium Falcon on there. I've got that one in 2 different sizes because it's huge the first time I made it. And then the second one is Outlander, and it's Craig Nadoon, and it says, Craig Nadoon Travel Company, we will take you places. For both of those, I did not just take the picture of the object on the Facebook ad and convert it. I haven't been able to be successful with that in PC Stitch. So what I did is I actually looked at the picture and hand drew it into the pattern until I was happy with it. For both versions of House Solo and for Craig Nadoon, because they just weren't, I can't do a picture conversion that I'm happy with because it picks up all kinds of extra colors and details. So those are in the Spartan Stitcher Etsy shop if you're interested. I will also link below the Full Coverage Fanatics group, the School of Magical Stitches group, and if you want to see any of my old finishes, I'll also put in a link to a blog that I have. I do not keep it updated, but it's got all my previous finishes on there on separate pages so you can see them. I want to thank everyone again for watching and subscribing. It's actually going to be above 0 this week in North Dakota, double digits. It'll still be below freezing, but we're very happy that it's not going to be obscene wind chills. So have a good stitchy week, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.